Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. Today's video is a special one. We're doing finally the Sony a7IV review. I know this has been some time coming, but I wanted to properly use this camera and really test it out in all paces so that I could bring you a proper, very thorough review of this camera, and that is what this video is today. So let's jump right into it, guys. Now, one quick housekeeping rule I'm just going to mention right now just to get out of the way. There will be sections in the description, so if you want to go to a certain part, just feel free to look in the description and you can go to any part you want. Sorry, I should say chapters, not sections. There will be chapters in the description for all the points I'm going to mention because, guys, there is quite a few. But let's get into it. Alright, to start off with, let's talk about the image quality. When I say image quality, we're talking about the photography side right now. The photo side is phenomenal. However, I will mention this right off the bat. It does have the same image quality as the Sony a7 III. Now, that's not necessarily a terrible thing, but comparing them side by side, they almost look identical. The Sony a7 IV may perform a little bit better, but for the most part, it's almost indistinguishable. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. The Sony a7 III was an amazing camera for the still capabilities that it did have, but just something I wanted to mention. But besides that, as you can see from the photos, they look incredible. The Sony a7 IV is a beast. And also, on top of that, to add, the Sony a7 III had 24 megapixels. The Sony a7 IV now packs 33 megapixel sensor, which honestly, in my opinion, I feel is the sweet spot. 45 was a little bit too much for me, and 20 was a little bit too less. 24 would have been nice as well, but 33 I think is a beautiful number. It's great for cropping, and so far I've loved it. I've had no issues at all with it. So yeah, 33 megapixel sensor, amazing image quality, love it. Now let's talk about the video quality and the video specifications a little bit. So the amazing thing about the Sony a7 IV, which I really loved, and is one of the reasons I actually got it, is that it now has 10-bit 4K video, like the Sony a7S III, which is incredible. On top of that, it has All-I and XAVC-S, which is great. I personally prefer All-I, XAVC All-I, because it runs so well on my computer. It's a higher quality format as well, and personally that's what I choose to run on. It does take a little bit more storage, but it's awesome. And the fact that it has 10-bit, guys, that alone makes this camera definitely worth it. And it's a lot more affordable than the Sony a7S III, and in that sense it's about what, $1,000 cheaper, and it's incredible. So the video quality out of this is, I don't know what to say. I'm mind-boggled, to be honest. Like, it's so sharp. It's downsampling from a 7K sensor, and then when you go into APS-C mode, I believe it's 4.2K. It's still downsampling, but it's a low amount. I think it's 4.2K. I'll put on the screen if I am wrong. But it's definitely sharper than the Sony a7S III. It really depends if you like that sharp look or not. You can always add a little bit of additional sharpening in post, but the photo and the video coming out of this camera is incredible. The dynamic range is amazing, guys, as well. So another thing I want to mention, the dynamic range is actually a little bit more than the Sony a7S III. I believe the correct amount is 12.7 stops of dynamic range, while the Sony a7S III was at 12.4. I will correct again if I am mistaken. Now, guys, I actually want to talk about the overheating. Now, overheating was a big thing that was mentioned early on, saying that, the a7 IV overheated while the a7S III didn't. This is actually incorrect. Well, for the most part. Let me explain. So, I actually ran some of my own tests, and what I found was this. I had the heater on pretty close to my camera, just to kind of test like a little bit more warmer temperature, right? And what I did was this. I left it on, the screen closed, and it ran for an hour and 38 minutes before the battery died, but as it ran to 138, just before the battery died, it did show the overheating signal, right? One thing I did was, I did set the overheating sign to high. I set it to high instead of the normal, and it ran to an hour and 38 before it showed the overheating sign. Now, it never overheated, and I didn't run after that. I thought, well, look, if it's showing the overheating sign, I probably wouldn't run it much longer than that anyway. But then I thought, hold on a second, let me do another test, and this time I actually had the screen out. Guys, it ran for 3 hours. 2 batteries died on me, and I reckon it would have ran a lot longer. No overheating sign, nothing. The heater was actually on as well. The room was relatively warm, and it did not overheat at all. I was actually surprised how much difference just having the screen out made, but it honestly did. I actually had a shower, I made some food and came back, and the camera was still going. And this is on XAVC All-I 4K 24p. It is incredible, guys. It will not overheat. I think the secret and the trick was just having the LCD out, which I don't know why it works. It did get warm, relatively warm, but I wouldn't say it was hot, but it was relatively warm. But guys, it did not overheat on me. Now on the 60p, I have done some tests, but nothing as long yet. But what I can say is this, from what I've read and what I've seen, it'll last for about an hour or so, which is pretty good at 50, 60p. I mean, if you're doing longer than that, then maybe this camera isn't for you guys. But for me personally, even when you're doing weddings or whatnot and you're running and gunning, you don't necessarily have to record slow-mo for the whole hour period. As you turn off the camera or as you switch, it'll regenerate and it should be fine. But I have to do more tests to kind of confirm on this. Now guys, let's talk about the 60p, 50p slow-mo on this camera. Yes guys, there is a crop. The infamous crop that everyone dislikes. But I gotta be honest guys, I've actually grown to love it. It doesn't bother me at all now, and sometimes it gives me that extra punch that I might have wanted anyway. And I have been using it intentionally like that, and the image quality from it, guys, really is incredible. The slow-mo, even though it's not 120, I find 60 more than enough, to be honest. It's great. And when you need just that little bit of slow-mo, it really does work well, and it's a beautiful image coming straight out of camera. Guys, I recommend it, and I wouldn't worry too much about the crop. I believe the crop is a 1.5 times crop. It's not that bad. It really isn't. It's actually pretty awesome. And when you learn how to use it intentionally, like, you know, if you want that close-up shot, it really does turn out great. So the crop mode doesn't bother me, and the image quality from the slow-mo is awesome, guys. As you can see, there's some videos playing now as well. You'll be able to get an idea, but so far, guys, I've really enjoyed it, and I'm not upset about it at all, to be honest. Alright guys, let's talk about the SD cards and their limitations. Now, I use a couple different SD cards. All three of them are 256 gigabytes. I have a ProGrade V90 256GB card. I also have a Kingston 256GB card. I forgot what it was called. And that one, honestly, has been running phenomenal. That's also a V90, and it's actually more affordable than the ProGrade, believe it or not. Which, don't get me wrong, the ProGrade is also very affordable. Both of them are V90s, and the last one I have is a Freetail 256GB, but this is a V60. So, guys, pretty much, to explain how this works, the V90s will run All-I, but only from 24 and 25p. Once you go into slow-mo, the 50 and 60p, you will need a CF Express card to run the All-I option. Otherwise, XAVC-S will be your best bet. Now, I personally am not a big fan of XAVC-S because it doesn't run well on my computer. It kind of lags, there's a kind of delay, and I generally have to render it and create proxies to be able to play back properly. With the All-I, it runs really smoothly and it's incredible, and that's what I generally prefer. So for my slow-mo, unfortunately, because the CF Express cards are so ridiculously expensive, and because I thought originally that the V90s would run it, I'm stuck with XAVC-S, which again isn't the worst thing. It's not terrible, but it does mean I do have to create proxies when shooting slow-mo and that kind of feature, because unfortunately the V90 cards will not run it. So just something to think about, guys. If you do want to do All-I in the slow-mo option and have everything unlocked, you will need a CF Express A card, which again, very hefty in price, but if you need it, that's what I would recommend. Now moving on to the battery life. Now the battery life is relatively decent. They have the same battery as the Sony a7S3, yeah, the Sony NP-FZ100. These little batteries, they're awesome. I've got about like 9 or 10 of them. Really good batteries. Might be a little bit overkill of how many batteries I actually have, but they are really great. Now, they will generally run for the A7IV for about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes, depending on the battery type and the mAh that you got on it. But generally, we're talking about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes in 4K all-eye, which is not too bad, guys. It's really not too bad. It really depends how you use it, but for the most part, an hour and a half is the very least you're going to get, which is okay. Now, I want to talk about the Sony a7IV and comparing it with my Sony a7S III. And here's the thing, guys. It's surprising to say this even for me, but I fell in love with the a7IV more so than I did with the a7S III. And I remember when I first had the a7S III, how much I loved it as a camera and how intuitive it was for me and how it made me want to go out and take videos and films. I didn't think another camera would necessarily do that soon, but the a7IV blew my mind. Because of the 33 megapixels sensor, and like the fact that I can take these beautiful images now with 33 megapixels, and the fact that the 4K video is phenomenal, and the dynamic range is actually even more so than the a7S III, the a7IV has become my favorite camera. There are some other features that the a7IV has that the a7S III doesn't have, and I don't know why. And Sony, if you're watching this, please give a firmware update for the a7S III to implement some of the features that the a7IV has that doesn't. You know what I'm talking about, and I will mention it in the video soon. So yeah, but otherwise, guys, I really love it. I think it's a phenomenal camera, and this has been honestly my go-to camera for all my YouTube videos. Everything's been done on the a7IV. It's actually being filmed on the a7IV as we speak right now. So yeah, I do love this camera. It has become my main camera at the moment, and yeah, love it. So let's talk about S-Cinetone. S-Cinetone is featured on this camera as well, which is awesome that they've added it on the a7S III, but as well as the Sony a7IV. I personally am not a huge fan of it. I don't really use the Sony Cinetone. I prefer S-Log3 because I feel like that gives you the most latitude for dynamic range and for color grading. So that's generally my preferred choice, but yes, you do have S-Cinetone available in the Sony a7IV as well, and it's a great profile to use if you're looking for doing a quick turnover for clients and stuff like that. I would recommend S-Cinetone, but if you have the time to grade and have a little bit more leverage, I would definitely recommend S-Log2 or S-Log3. Now, let's talk about focus breathing. This is one of those features that's only added on the a7IV and I believe the A1, if I'm not mistaken, but it's not on the a7S III or the FX3. Breathing compensation is pretty much some of the lenses, how can I explain this? They breathe a little bit. I'm going to try and show you a video if I can, but pretty much they have these trouble breathing and you can see kind of movement between the subject. What focus compensation does is it removes that completely, especially with the G Master lenses, like the 24-70, the 35mm, the 24mm, and I believe the 85 if I'm not mistaken. They all had focus breathing issues a little bit, right? Now this pretty much removes it. There's like a slight crop from memory, but it'll remove it completely and you won't even notice it. So now when it kind of focuses, it's a smooth focus. There's not going to be any more of that breathing as it was before, which is awesome, guys. And I really wish and I hope they'll add this on the a7S III in a future update. Another really cool feature that I realized on the Sony a7IV is the variable shutter, which is awesome, guys. So this is really useful if, for example, you're filming an LED or a computer or a TV and you'll notice those like rolling shutters on the TV. That's because it doesn't match the shutter frame, right? The shutter is off. And what the variable shutter does, it gives you increments of 0.1. So you can do 50.1, 50.2, 50.3, 50.4, and so on, and 50.5. And until you find that right one where it removes the shutter of the TV screen completely, sometimes you'll notice those like black bars and stuff moving around. Now you have the variable shutter to fix this option, which is just awesome, guys. So another great feature that I highly recommend you guys check out if you guys are shooting LED screens or computer screens, mobile phones, etc. Now let's talk a little bit about the low light capabilities of the Sony a7IV. The Sony a7IV is actually really incredible in low light. It's not as good as the a7S III, but it's not necessarily meant to be either. It does have a higher megapixel count, 33 megapixels, and as you know, the more megapixels it has, the less it's going to be great in low light. But, however, up to about 12,800 ISO, this camera is very, very usable. I personally don't prefer to use noise reduction software. Whatever I can get in camera, I want to get. So the cleaner the cleanest image I can get is sort of what I want, right, out of camera. And this up to 12,800 ISO has no issue at all. So it has two base ISOs, 800 and 3200. And 3200, in all honesty, is great. I think it's, for most scenarios, is going to be perfect. Now, if you're able to light the scenes, even better, and which you really should be. But in an instance where you can't, I honestly think up to 12,800, you have a very usable image. So, yeah, it is great. As you can see, this is some footage that's taken with the Sony a7IV. It looks awesome, guys. And this was pretty dark as well in most scenarios. So, yeah. Now, let's talk about the a7IV as a hybrid camera and what my thoughts are. Now, coming from the R5 and the R6, which I originally bought as to be my hybrid cameras, while they were great, they had limitations. For me, the biggest limitation with the R5 and the R6, there was actually two main ones. One was the overheating was a real thing, while on the a7IV, that's completely gone. The second big one was the time limit, the 30-minute time limit. I don't know what Canon was thinking or doing, because that tax thing is done and ended, and there shouldn't be a time limit at all, especially for cameras that high-end and that expensive. The Sony a7IV has no record limit like the a7S III, and that's why it honestly, in my opinion, it really is the perfect hybrid camera. Out of all the cameras I've used so far, the GH5, the R5, the R6, the R, and all the other ones, right? This one by far has to be my favorite of all, even more so than the a7S III, because it has the higher megapixel crop, which allows me to crop in the image, and the image quality is honestly phenomenal. So as a hybrid camera, this really is the near perfect hybrid camera. In all honesty, it's pretty much perfect for me, and I can't ask for more than that. So I really do love it as a hybrid camera. Now, I also want to mention the dial switch. I know it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is a game changer, for me at least anyway. I really personally like it. I can just quickly switch into photo, video, and S&Q mode very easily, and there's no issue whatsoever. I actually really like it, and you can also set different settings for your camera, for the video, and for the S&Q in the menu system, which is also very intuitive and great to have. So it's a great feature, really like it. Alright guys, final thoughts. My final thoughts are this. The a7IV, I think, is an amazing hybrid camera. I would highly recommend it if you guys are in the market and do photo and video, and if you don't really have the budget. Even if you had the budget, I would argue the a7IV is a better option than the Sony a7S III, and with that extra $1,000, I would invest in some nice fast glass, whether it's a prime or the 24-105, or save a little bit more and get one of the telephoto G Master lenses. Because honestly guys, this is such an incredible camera, and even though I've got my a7S III sitting right here, here it is, I still prefer the Sony a7IV pretty much 95% of the time, guys. I've been using this exclusively, and it really is my now favorite camera of all time. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. That is the end of this comprehensive review. If I've missed anything, please leave it in the comments and I'll be more than happy to answer it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. It really does help the channel, and if you aren't subscribed already, please consider subscribing. I make lots of videos regarding photography, videography, reviews, and other things like that. So if you'd like to see more, please hit the subscribe button, and as always guys, I'll see you guys on the next one.